Now commencing the last part of our BIM HYDE Park and the second discussion panel as planned. I hope you are still with us. Now we will be talking about BIM competences. And a few terms. Does a construction engineer need some additional competences willing to apply BIM methodology? And if so, should it only be an engineer? How to form these competences in ordering parties, designers and contractors? Should they be standardized and certified? How to provide proper BIM education among students, engineering staff and people managing resources? What should academic BIM look like? I mean, not only education-wise, but also scientific research or cooperation with industry. In my opinion, digitalization of construction for us, for our academia, is a big chance, but it's also a challenge. After panel discussion, similar like before, there will be time for a Q&A session. You can ask your questions on the chat, and if we do not manage to answer, we will do our best to pass them on to people who will be able to answer your questions. So now let me invite the following experts to the panel. Let me introduce them in alphabetical order. Mr. Łukasz Gorgolewski, head of BIM Commission in the National Council of Construction Engineers. Good afternoon. Mr. Dr. Sławomir Heller, founder of Inframa Academy. Good afternoon. Dr. Jacek Magiera, assistant professor at Krakow University of Technology. Good afternoon. Mr. President Bogdan Lisowski, head of Polish Association of Architects. Professor Tomasz Owerko, professor at HYDE University of Technology. Good afternoon. And Director Przemysław Wielowiejski from Copernicus Scientific Center. Good afternoon. Welcome. So in order to avoid extending this introduction, let's start from questions. The first question goes to Mr. Łukasz Gorgolewski and to Sławomir Heller. Many people and even decision makers are convinced that coordinator or manager in BIM you can become by participating in a weekend on Meet BIM or completing some training of BIM modeling tools at one of the producers. In your opinion, whether proper application of BIM technology methodology is so easy that it doesn't require specialist knowledge? May such training courses be sufficient for an engineer who only knew it from 3D modeling side or took their knowledge from internet only? Łukasz? A few years ago, when I was preparing opinion on professional qualifications of a BIM manager, I wanted to learn what the situation looked like at that time, leading the UK. And I encountered their informal but requirements. BIM managers face their, apart from a diploma in construction from a university. Well, when I say construction, we understand all sectors related to construction. I'm an electrical engineer, but quite naturally, construction engineer as well. So apart from that, experience was required in working in construction. That means in AC, and whereas many entrepreneurs expected at least 5 years of experience, that means awareness of construction processes which are in place, and then familiarity with modeling processes was necessary, and perfect skills in using a computer and software, skills in communication, both verbal and written, and knowledge about using quality management and documentation management. So this is a response to this question. This cannot be achieved at any training course. There is also a question which I'm highlighting, that BIM is only a tool, excellent tool, having its application, but in order to use this tool, you must have yet additional knowledge which is held by people who individually manage work, construction sites, or supervising inspectors. You gain this knowledge through years of practical experience, which is later confirmed by confirmation of your authorization. And in scope of life cycle of buildings, it is planning, designing, construction, and then handing over for use. And then during use, it is refurbishment, maintenance, rebuilding, and then demolishing finally. So if we talk of a coordinator or manager in BIM, then contrary to people holding individual technical positions in construction, the responsibility is not defined. A designer or construction site manager is subject to penal, professional, disciplinary, and civil responsibility due to holding those individual positions. And finally, this is also significant for this answer, a question arises whether BIM manager profession is a profession for life. Of course not. Now it is a profession which is necessary, but with the time passing when BIM application will become more common, so this role played now by BIM manager, these competences will be taken over by other participants of this process, and already without the need to have a label of BIM or manager or the role of manager, they will be doing this job. But today, in order to implement this methodology, it is necessary in many situations. Thank you very much. So the same question or questions are addressed at Dr. Heller. A very interesting question, but it is related to two next questions without answering which the first one cannot be answered, namely what BIM and what management. ISO 19650 standard, which is an explanation of BIM, defines that it defines the series of roles of BIM manager at the delivery stage, providing the investment project. It is a manager at the side of the contractor and manager at the side of the ordering party. There is also a BIM coordinator who is, end of the day, manager, but at operation stage, that means at exploitation, we have asset manager. So we have managers at two sides, at the side of contractors on the one hand, and then on the side of the ordering party. And the first group was and is satisfied historically by BIM relatively well, but there was quite a serious deficit, shortages regarding that group of managers at the side of the ordering party. This was an empty field, and practically it had to be filled in, and ISO 19650 standard filled in the gap, and these standards define very substantially, they precise the tasks of a manager at the side of the contractor, actually. And seeing these tasks, you can clearly determine what qualifications must must fulfill. Naturally, the question is whether within a weekend training course like BIM manager, it's very simple. Can you fulfill these roles and pass on these qualifications? Probably not. I would feel bad in an organization managed by weekend managers. Nevertheless, I would not look down at the role of short courses in training such managers in order to pass on the basics, the foundation of the discipline. And here, even short, brief weekend courses, symbolic weekend courses, are of great importance. Such training courses allow to convey certain information which shape awareness of the manager, person managing infrastructure. That means the BIM manager at the side of the ordering party, allowing them to show what BIM is about and what is not about BIM. It is a very important thing. so as to avoid him being attacked by certain offers from the market, which for his organization, his context, are not necessary. The point is to show how he or she has to prepare organization for BIM project, but also if somebody tell them that planning or modeling in 3D is something absolutely necessary, so that he knows that it is not necessarily so, to have this awareness. So therefore, training courses, which I also organize quite regularly, well, titled, yes, BIM, in accordance with 19,650, preparing people to enter the area, especially for infrastructure managers. This was my answer. Thank you very much. So in this context of gaining BIM competences, let me address Przemysław Wielowiejski, the director, whether extending tender requirements in relation to BIM manager is well-grounded, and if so, how to provide a reliable evaluation and comparison for BIM employees at the bidder side. It is a very good question. We, of course, as investor and the ordering party, have been convinced that we want to have this tool. And practical experience tells us it is very difficult at various levels. That means it is very difficult regarding gaining qualified individuals, both at the side of contractor as well as the ordering parties, whereas evaluation of competences had to be done through qualification interviews regarding the ordering party, whereas evaluation from the side of bidders, well, we put forth requirements actually related to experience, because, I mean, experience and educational background, because we realized that not many construction companies yet have those experienced BIM managers on board, and even we were blamed that putting forth such a requirement may question the tender procedure as such, because this would be disqualifying bidders who so far have not had that kind of experience. But anyway, our opinion prevailed that in the market there is not only one company, because if there was only one company fulfilling such requirements, then of course such a tender could not be held. But as we had recognized the market and we knew that there are more companies of this character, we could announce this tender procedure. But as I said, putting forth the criteria was relatively difficult, to avoid saying impossible, and verification thereof is going on the go, because BIM criterion at the tender for general contractor is not the only criterion. So, and it is also about points to be scored. So if companies filing for a tender showed that they had a BIM manager fulfilling the requirements we put forth, it did not decide about which company would win, because there were more items of the criteria. Thank you very much. So now quite a general question. Let me address it to representatives of professional organizations, to Mr. Bogdan Lisowski and Łukasz Gorgolewski, who should a future architect or digital engineer in construction should be? Well, you could answer this question at length, but please be brief. So should we develop competences within traditional system of background and authorities, or should we form new functions and roles to put forth requirements? I don't know who should start. Well, it seems to me that we should not be creating new specializations separate from normal educational path for architects or construction engineers, because this is the natural technological progress which we have seen for years. In order to, and when we state that we were not educating computer operators in 1970s to shift from drawing on board to the computer-based technical drawing. So now we cannot leave those architects in vacuum. This is a process which should be implemented, and it seems to me that the core of the matter is to realize already at the level of university studies, to realize what competences, what BIM competences, and in what sectors and in what future professions should be developed. Just like Inuit people have 26 different words to name snow, I often see that BIM is actually one word for all set of things. So at the level of university, it should be clearly defined already. And it seems to me that this situation is becoming normalized. Still a few years ago, BIM actually was understood as operating the tool for modeling, and at the classes neither methodology nor investment process related to that was discussed, but only operating the tool in the role of an operator. Today, the world and what is happening in Polish construction in those investment projects which have been implemented according to BIM methodology, you can clearly see that we are short of these competences at individual positions related to people who operate within this process. Here we talked today about coordinators and managers, and these are actually those elements which at this stage of education at university should be clearly defined. Thank you. We heard opinion of architects, so now construction engineers' opinion. Of course, I wanted to focus here on the activities of construction engineer, being designing and managing construction sites and investor supervision. But in order to actually correlate it with my predecessor's input, not going into dispute whether designing is creation or craftsmanship, because this is not the point. In both these areas, we face gaining knowledge and competence by disciple learning from the master. So independent from what tool those artists, creators, or craftsmen were using, that took time, and I believe it will stay in place. So therefore, I agree with my predecessor that we will not change it. Having said that, new tools are arriving. Like my predecessor mentioned, at a certain stage, a computer came in. Now we have BIM methodology in place. So I wanted to look historically at this regarding new professions in organization of designing during the transformation in our country. Many changes took place. Firstly, large construction office, design office have been cancelled, and now single discipline design offices or small design offices or individual designers having their activities registered. And as a result of this, a charting profession disappeared because designers were doing the same work by themselves, and then by using a computer and computer-aided software applications, they were doing drawings by themselves. Whereas in the UK, the card drafter stayed as a profession, and then it got converted into a new profession of a BIM modeler. And now in Poland, again, new design offices are reappearing, and also engineers are reappearing, doing the new profession of BIM modeler. So therefore we can recognize that regarding designers themselves, we are staying with the old system, whereas also new professions may emerge. I was already highlighting before that it is important to know the construction process, and you gain this knowledge during practical experience, whereas a designer should know what tools they can have available, what the tools provide in opportunities, but not necessarily he or she must do the model by themselves. They can delegate employees to do the job, but they should be able to use elementary tools, at least to view this model, to locate it, to remove collisions. But apart from that, should know what BIM methodology is based on as a whole. On the other hand, one should remember that not always and not everywhere BIM can be applied, and it will not be applied still in many places. I wanted to remind you that in the UK, obligatory BIM, I don't know if it is still the case, but at the beginning it was related to central investment projects above 100 million pounds. But now designers who will not be using BIM for various reasons, or public procurement will not always make sense for using this BIM. One should remember that digitalization in general and BIM methodology are only a tool, but there are also other kinds of software from this area related strictly to calculations in individual sectors, whereas if we talk, my predecessor mentioned digital revolution, which introduction of computers was. I wanted to share my experience regarding first digital revolution I encountered at the last year of my studies. After the final test, the lecturer said, now I give calculations separate for those who were using the sliding calculating device and for those who used a calculator. It was 50 years ago, but until now, I get results of calculations where a couple dozen watt calculations are specified with the accuracy to the fourth digit after the point. So independent from what tool you are using, you should remember to use it properly.
Let me remind to all the listeners and the participants of this event that you are free to ask your questions. And so, as this is the fact that I am the time manager here, so please ask your questions in advance, as it will help me to manage the time. And now my academia colleagues, Jacek Magiera and Tomasz Oberko. So the question is, who should be involved in developing of the competences, and should this be as a part of engineering studies, or MA studies, or postgraduate studies, or external courses? What should be the system? I believe that I would take the risk and say I think it is absence in this understanding of building life cycle. I mean the CapEx and OpEx, and there is also the matter of the education. And I believe that BIM, which involves all these phases and integrates all these phases, it is an indispensable element of education. And I have 5 years experience in BIM studies in the Krakow University of Technology, and from so we started this on the second level, MA level. This is the curriculum for the MA studies is also significantly affected by chambers of the trade chambers. So there is no space for extending of the curriculum, as we are going to have some difficulties with the building qualifications. And the first problem, I think it is not a good time to discuss this. It's more difficult to discuss this, but it seems that at the MA level we have only 3 semesters, 3 terms, and over 3 terms we need to teach students from scratch. I mean, we need to introduce the methodology and the systems of BIM, and we also have students coming to us from other universities who are enrolled to MA studies. So there is no single foundation, there's no common foundation for these students. So these are 3 terms, 3 semesters available for these students need to be very intensive, and in fact we do not have enough time for more interesting projects. And these students, before the graduation, this shows their potential. Or a week ago, you might have been in a conference. There were 2 students out of 8 students, 4 industries, 3 faculties, including the coordinator of BIM projects, and 5 supporters. So that was an experimental project, and we needed to start a laboratory for them for just 1 day after working hours, as this is the time they needed for the teamwork. And the conclusions from this MA thesis is that without this teamwork, they wouldn't be able to understand what the construction industry is, what designing process is, and what their future work is going to look like. So these are very important experiences, and the lesson learned is that if we were able from the very beginning, from the BA level and also from the vocational schools, please remember that in Poland we have quite a lot of construction secondary schools or land surveying schools, and this knowledge can be transferred on to them on a much sooner. So at MA level, we would be able to implement very interesting projects, and we would be able to involve or implement these integrated processes. Thank you. That's a very good idea. And so I think that you know how the secondary technical schools can cooperate inside Legia, and this is the project we are now running. Hopefully we will be successful with this. As you mentioned, from the implementation of BIM and making BIM more common and cooperation with academia, from these perspectives, probably we should separate 6 different steps. At the very beginning, we need to be aware that universities, technical universities, they are universities who are required to teach people, but they are also organizations who need to do some R&D work. So they should also cooperate with business. They should do some implementation. And this is not a threat for this process, but this is an opportunity. And so I agree with Mr. Magiera, my colleague from the Technical University, and it is quite difficult to have quite extensive, interesting offer to the students in BA studies, taking into account the requirements which need to be fulfilled. Obviously, in all universities, also ours, we try to develop BIM and BIM competences in non-obligatory subjects, and also try to convince our students to participate and to involve these processes in apprentices. So universities are open, and also on the BA thesis level, that's also the case with the business universities. The thesis should also involve application of BIM. Another important aspect is encouraging people who are particularly interested in this subject to help them to acquire these competences. It is like investing their time, like scientific, and involving them in scientific clubs. And this is also putting these most active students into scientific projects. And it is not necessarily the university need to be leaders of such projects. And it also needs to be emphasized that there is a good cooperation with the Polish Association of Engineers of Construction, so the Polish Association of Construction Industry Employers and other associations. So this beginning of the cooperation looks really nice, and I believe we will be able to create those, develop these primary skills. But of course, it's also very important to maintain those scientific skills, and this happens in all universities, technical universities. But for those people who would like, in a structured way, deepen their knowledge, so of course they can enroll to postgraduate studies, and these studies also have teachers who are not only from the academia but also practitioners from the market. And usually postgraduate studies have like 9 to 12 subject studies or topic studies, and so they all involve all these areas. So absolutely, the scientific clubs, this is a great potential which is not fully used, but also we have some programs also in the Silesian University of Technology, but the pandemic damaged all this, and this relationship contacts are now a little bit weaker, but hopefully we will get back to this. And Mr. Wielowiejski and Lisowski, let me ask you, is the current method of defining in the tenders requirements on BIM skills, is that going to guarantee fulfilling of the requirements on the skills? I'm not sure who is going to speak first. Mr. Wielowiejski. One thing is good defining of criteria. Another aspect is reliability in terms of statements made by the other party. As on the competition or architecture competition, which is used to select architecture office, designing office. So on the level of the selecting of the general contractor, on the one hand, we need to base on the criteria, but on the other hand, we also need to base on some statements that indeed these entities have people who declare having all these skills, like IT managers and designers. So on the later stage, when we sign a contract, we are able to verify this, and sometimes there are some discrepancies occur between the statements and the reality, and it is important that the other party, like the designing office or a general contractor, their approach should be reliable, like they should try to catch up the differences between their statements and the actual state, actual condition, as before defining of designing office or general contractor, we are unable to verify if the people they declare to have the competences indeed do have the competences which are important for us. So it might be helpful if graduates of construction faculties and technical universities would be able to demonstrate their skills when they work for designing offices or general contractors. And this would facilitate for entities like ours who are looking for contractors. So we would have this like confirmed that the experts who are supposed to have some skills indeed do have some diplomas and certificates confirming that they guarantee the level we expect. And I agree about, the analogy with how many different names of snow indigenous people have in these competences of people who need to design and then monitor implementation of the process, construction process. But it is also about using of digital platform and information sharing, as this digital information data sharing is an important element for both processes in the designing phase and in the construction phase. And it turns out it is not that easy. And I'm not talking about the tool itself, but I'm talking about some habits that contractors or supervisors, the contract engineers, frequently they use their previous practice, and it is difficult for them to exchange information only using the platform. But in fact, it really helps. I'm not talking about the manual writing of memos, but it is also about sending emails. This is one of the elements of the entire process, which sometimes it is difficult. And it's on the one hand, it is easy, but mentally, there is some kind of barrier which needs to be broken. So that's the perspective of the buyer. So if I recollect some declarations, so I think snow is going to be here sooner than BIM, hopefully, probably in a month. Mr. Lisowski now. So adding on this practical information on the investment path discussed by Mr. Wielowiejski, and discussing the core of the issue, like should these competences, how should we record the competences, how should we verify the competences, and our association co-organized a competition, and the experiences of Mr. Director have been included in all the stages of the designing phase and in the implementation of the investment until now. But our Association of Architects of the Republic of Poland, we also participated in the Małopolska Science Center and the Music Center. So one of the attachments was IER was one of the attachments defining detailed requirements of the buyer. So the dilemma which always is there, it is this attempt to convince the buyer not to so involvement of the participants, as if it happens that the skills are unverifiable, it might so probably some frauds may happen. So if we really are based on the declarations or the statements, so the tender committee or jury, competition jury, probably should carry out some kind of examinations to verify the competences. And of course, there is no, it's not possible under the regulations of for tenders. So I believe that we need to apply a rational approach to the market situation, like Mr. Director, one of the originators one of the first ones to include the BIM elements in the tender processes. So if that was more broadly distributed, so the situation would be totally different. And so now we have the certificates, we have some tools in place, and they could be required to be submitted, and they would be some kind of guarantee of competences, but still, particularly in these sections of the investment process which are not related strictly with the designing phase, but more with the construction, like or implementation, there are, like Mr. Director mentioned, so what is important, like the information data sharing platform, this is an area where different players in the process have totally different perspective, different perception of what it should look like. And I believe there is also a very important role of the educational process. Like Mr. Magiera's laboratory probably should be included for good in the process, as the CDF should be something which is not only taught but also practically tested. Mr. Magiera, you have been mentioned, so let me ask Jacek Magiera. You are a co-author of BIM agenda for the Polish universities. I don't remember where exactly it was, but it was a couple of years ago. And from the time perspective, how do you assess this idea? And does that continue, or are there any attempts to make it more formalized? So historically, the document was published in 2017, and it was related with two separate streams of actions. One was that was together with an Association of Polish Architects and also other organization we wanted, and also the V4 group was also were also involved, like with the Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, and Hungary, and we were working like a think tank to develop some strategic assumptions. And this think tank was transferred into BIM committee, and Mr. Secretary General, Mr. Piwkowski, is a great supporter and some kind of visionary of this implementation process. And he made a simple calculations. How many engineers do we have? And what is the demand for education? So it turned out, so if we want to start BIM by 2025, so we need to have at least 20,000 engineers ready to enter the market and work, competent work, at least on the satisfactory level, applying the BIM methodology. And of course, this is a huge educational task for some professional chambers, professional trade chambers. And it is clear that the higher education system should involve the BIM methodology in their curricula. And this is the initiative of the BIM committee for universities, Warsaw, Krakow University of Technology, and the Military Academy of Science, and the Krakow University of Science. So now we have had a third draft to the BIM curricula, and all these universities have been asked to develop these curricula, and we were aware that the level 1, it is very difficult to add 30 hours, and there's very little, as we need to teach people the processes and the tools. So the idea was, and the BIM rudiments, the BIM foundations, like some kind of laboratory, should be included in the curricula as soon as possible. And also in my home Institute of IT Technologies, it turned out that we believe that teaching of Evita and AutoCAD is a stake. So if you start if you learn how to think 2D, so if you are just a drawer, so you will be using BIM and also drawing some lines. So semantically, this will be not a transfer of information. So these are experiences which can be translated into our work and commission, and these 4 universities are involved to develop some kind of proposal. And this proposal was formalized, and so we have developed a report which clearly defined curriculum and also the saturation of BIM processes in some subjects or some topics. So we try to make students familiar with BIM at every level, and this will definitely increase the level of awareness. And we're also looking at the UK, and they have the BIM Academy, and they published their reports in 2013 and 2015, and they structured they have been aware, infused, and been embedded. So these are the 3 levels which are used in the UK. And I believe the easiest, the simplest, the foundation, so making people aware of BIM and developing of the new type of engineers, or digital construction engineer. So that's the goal. And it is not about the BIM itself. It is about digitizing of the process of designing and implementation, construction, managing of linear infrastructure of buildings. Marek, you were asking what are the outcomes. Firstly, of course, universities need to follow their budgets. Universities are autonomous, and they have their own budgets. I know 3 universities who volunteered to participate in the project, and after publishing of the report, it was distributed to the deans of the faculties of universities. And that's where this idea was proposed, and these 3 universities got interested. And what I can say is that looking at the BIM map, BIM education in Poland of 2016, and in the last panel that was mentioned, a meeting in the Ministry of Infrastructure. So we were preparing for the meeting, and very few universities offered different or very little, very few topics that they were offered at the very beginning level. And now we have a couple of universities offering postgraduate, and even the Częstochowa University of Technology, they started the BIM specialty, and this is a pioneering activity. And many universities offer these subjects. So I believe the primary task of the report and the initiative, it was to create some kind of development, but also supporting and prepare some kind of schedule or some. It was successful, but of course the universities are autonomous and their faculties are autonomous, and I hope that this is going to develop. This is going to happen dynamically. And together with Mr. Magiera, we all know exactly how or what is working on competences in universities, how difficult it is to implement the changes in the curricula. And now let me ask Mr. Heller, your assumption, so you started your academy in Frama. What is the difference between your academy and the traditional academia? What are your goals and targets? So let me start with 2 sentences about the gymnasiums. For some time, I have been representative of Germany in the technical association of road construction. Over 4 years, I was heading this work group, dissemination by education, and it was to promote BIM worldwide. And we were also dealing with other situations that was obvious. And I had a fantastic team over the last 4 years, a dozen or so experts. We did some analysis of more than 100 projects worldwide, and we published some reports. They are available for all of you to use, but the process was associated with my frustration, my personal frustration, as I observed a huge difference between asset management, Anglo-Saxon, New Zealand, Australia, and in Europe, Central Europe in particular. And clearly this frustration, and based on the information from people I met, there was created an idea to create infraBIM Academy, and there are two differences on two different levels, and the curriculum and the form. As for the curriculum, we concentrate on asset management basis based on the ISO 55000, but also we concentrate on risk management, and we concentrate the market, and we also concentrate on information management and broadly understood BIM. So that's the element. We treat all these disciplines as which shouldn't be independent. They should interfere one with another, as too much money is involved in this infrastructure, transport infrastructure, to be able to manage it by managers who are lacking qualifications. But as for the form, there are three elements. This is mainly the formal presentation, that's clear, but also very strongly emphasis is put on the workshops and some business games, and these are also very important elements. And let me also emphasize this. Very important is also the dialogue, the dialogue among trainers and the trainers and participants. It is important for us that participants get to some solutions by themselves, independently, based on confrontation of goals, and this is going to be their own solution, not the imposed solution. And it's also very important that we are aware that there is some kind of blockage of innovativeness, the blockage of progress is within us, with our heads, as we are using some kind of stereotypes. In half an hour, we are going to have a bigger presentation on how to fight against stereotypes. But probably some broadly used phrases are not supporting development of our own solutions. So this is our goal. And as for the form, is it going to be a university training, or is it going to be lifelong learning, or like weekend courses or summer schools or whatever? We try to adjust the form to individual needs of individual managers of infrastructures, as they are mainly the target group of offer, and we are for them.
Thank you very much. Time is flying. Actually, I have two questions remaining in order to get ready for answering questions from chat. So to addressing Mr. Przemysław Wielowiejski, this was already said. You are one of the founders of BIM in Poland at the side of the ordering party. What was the greatest challenge related to it at the design stage and then in implementation? Well, at design stage, as I mentioned, there was some difference between declarations and reality. Fortunately, design office noted the opportunities to improve their qualifications in cooperation with us, and this was really the case, but it demanded of us as an investor to employ competent people so that there is a possibility for cooperation with the use of BIM tools between the ordering party and the designer. This was of key importance because we later had to be the recipient of this project and of this design, and we then later had to implement it, to build it. So the second problem is based on the fact that those people with BIM competences are still very few in the market, and we as an institution of culture and at the same time us as investor have faced really the problem that those very good individuals who cooperated with us at the stage of design work unfortunately left and went to better paying entities, and it was also under the influence undoubtedly of the fact that in public sector the investment implementation process can be extended, can be lengthened. We had to repeat the tender for general contractor, so this puts off in time the moment of implementation of the design, and those young people who saw that BIM is developing, not seeing the possibility to wait until the beginning of construction work. They found a place for themselves in other private companies where that dynamism is faster. And this is a real problem also regarding public sector, that here all this process of preparation and implementation of investment may last so long that people who are ambitious and competent will be looking for opportunities for acting sooner and improving their qualifications in the market in more private sector rather than public. So these are the two main problems. We still have a problem gaining people. We would like to have such people available at the stage of construction, of implementation of the investment, and we have to manage somehow. But it is difficult because there are still very, very few of those graduates available. So the last question remains, which I will address Professor Tomasz Owerko with, how the academia could get involved in development and bringing order in Polish BIM market. Do we have some proposal here? Well, a question which I myself would like to answer. Well, all in all, I'm not astonished, Marek, because you are a co-author. Well, we among people and research teams in individual technical universities involved in BIM technology, we have diagnosed two problems, and we want to find a solution to them, and it seems possible now to succeed. The first problem is that we wanted to start cooperating not only inside the university, because such work within one scientific unit are precious, but more important and more valuable are those of cooperation between universities. And the second element is exposition of those people to the economic environment, and to identify those individuals in academia who are interested in, who are working and hands-on engineers using these technologies. And thus, academic node for digitalization of construction industry has been established. And this initiative was initiated by colleagues from universities of technologies all over Poland, Silesian, Wrocław, Warsaw, Lublin, Gdańsk, Krakow universities of technology, and HYDE University in Krakow. And letters of intent have been exchanged between rectors of HYDE University of Technology and Silesian University of Technology in Gliwice, and in the nearest future we will have a kickoff meeting of the team. And I would like we invite all people interested in cooperation. You can contact me, Dr. Magiera, or Professor Salamak. well, any of us, because we will be meeting in one big team anyway. And let's hope that this academic node for digitalization of construction will be a good partner for cooperation with individual specialties, architects, surveyors, and construction engineers, and it will be able to influence the curriculum of studies and will influence economic environment. I mean, the questions related to standardization, both of services as well as description of the subject of order and technologies which are used, so that the environment, economic environment and academia are in possibly best symbiosis. Yes, thank you, Tomek. So we are beginning an adventure which was mentioned this morning by Professor Nowak, something new. I think we will manage to get something new. I'm looking at the comments and questions. There is little time available. We would like to wrap up this HYDE Park, so I will skip comments because discussion burst out on the chat, but let me pick questions. First question is from Michał to Mr. Lisowski. Where to look for good BIM managers today if it was stated that BIM managers are only for a short while, so how to encourage people to go training in this direction? Well, I don't know where it was said, because I didn't insist that BIM managers are there only for a short while, but I think that similar to the situation of an architect getting a diploma after graduating university and construction engineer become full-blooded designers after gaining authority. There is some stage of gaining experience, be it at construction site or in design office. Therefore, I quite poorly imagine that we would be producing net managers who directly after graduating from the university would find their place at construction sites. It must be a process related to professional improvement and internships. And it seems to me, well, I will not answer where to find them. Yes, they are available in the market. As we mentioned here, there are not too many of them available. Director Wielowiejski knows it perfectly well, but we must not avoid talking about it. We must not stop, but first of all, we must educate people who train people who will be experts in this BIM element. So a question from Arek. It is a lengthy and very general question, so please think who would like to answer it. Don't you think, gentlemen, that BIM or learning programming is an annex, addition to engineering knowledge? In my opinion, writing a master thesis should be related to BIM and not about BIM. Unfortunately, engineers graduating from the university end up at the position of charter. They are highly valued abroad, but they are actually considered only charter and vocational secondary expert. Well, this is a question addressed clearly at the academia, so I will try to cope with it a bit. I think that, yes, of course, there is a problem with where our graduates go. This construction boom we face for a few years now was actually winding up this job market, and I don't have the impression that our graduates, I'm talking of graduates of Krakow University of Technology, to keep working as charters. Well, a few exceptional careers, like Maciej Kindler, present in these workshops at infraBIM, who a few years after graduating from our university became BIM project manager at the level of, I guess, £2 billion. These are those spectacular careers which were mentioned here, but let me put it like this. For example, students after BIM specialty from our University of Technology after the first edition who graduated after 2016. Two of them, I learned work as BIM coordinators in a project in one of Scandinavian countries. At a project evaluated at 1 million euros. So it is not a charting job. And I think that education in BIM, especially in BIM, is translated into professional success in the market. Of course, that will always be a question how many such individuals are there. Interesting study. Our university examine our graduates after half a year and after 3 years of their being in the market, and here we have a report. So at www.pl you can learn it. One of the interesting points, students are asked about various things, but among others, what subject or even personally about names in their educational path during studying at Krakow University of Technology. Now they consider to have been valuable from the perspective of their job. And practically the only specialty of this kind was given as BIM. So let this be an example. So these competences, if program is well prepared, I don't mean to say ours is perfect, but we are trying to modify it, improve it. And if students take a very diligent approach to it, and let me admit that to BIM specialty, we actually have draw very enthusiastic students, dynamic students, so everybody believes a lot can be done with those students. And I believe it to be a sign of the new era and the situation of graduates working as chartering specialists is coming to an end. I raised my hand earlier. I wanted to address my colleagues from the academia. You keep talking of civil engineering, but I would like you to forget not to forget that the third group among construction engineers are electrical engineers, and they are not treated equally seriously, because as I remember at Warsaw University of Technology there was a common interdepartmental project, but among universities I know at electrical departments no classes were held in whatever way related to BIM. This is really a numerous group within our professional self-government, so please remember about it. I know that there are changes coming into place, and electricians are combined together with sanitary systems in energy power departments, but please do not forget about them. On the other hand, BIM is so fascinating, or practically modeling in BIM, that I know a few examples of people who actually had a grasp of BIM and graduated from construction department, and they are completely not interested in gaining their authorization, professional rights, and to continue this path, because modeling as such actually attracted them so much. So such situations also do happen. Let me add to what Dr. Magiera said. Yes, actually, we can have the impression, and I hope it will be actually dying out gradually, that we also notice it at AGH University, that competences, digital competences of our graduates are more appreciated compared to the situation in Poland. But I agree with Mr. Magiera that this trend is reverting gradually, and I hope this will be a continuous, permanent trend. Well, so we have to conclude. It's very fine talking to you, but maybe without pandemic it would be much worse. But a very brief question, maybe Dr. Heller could answer it, because it is much easier to learn from you. Is, in your opinion, BIM much better developed in Germany than here at the moment? I find it difficult to say, because, as I said, we would have to ask about what BIM. Regarding technical questions, I believe it is comparable. comparable, but regarding the issues of managerial character at the ordering parties, it is slightly more developed. There are the whole range of projects there. So in the first BEAM category, I would dare say that the situation is one of a draw, if I can evaluate it from my perspective. Whereas in the second category, with prevalence of the German side. Thank you very much. I didn't manage to ask all the questions, so I do apologize. We will do our best to pass on these questions to you. This ends the second discussion panel and the BEAM HYDE PARK as such during this year's edition at BEAM HYDE PARK Expo. Actually, both of us who moderated the whole event, we have Justyna Pożarowska online. Thank you. Thanks to panelists. Thank you, all panelists. Derek, the microphone is not working. So once again, welcome, Marek. Thank you. And thanks to our panelists, thank you to the audience for actively participating in our panels today. It's not the end yet. Therefore, now let me ask for the summary of our BEAM HYDE PARK. Let me ask a representative of Public Procurement Office, the office which initiated this form of discussion about BEAM. That means Ms. Justyna Pożarowska, General Advisor at the Public Procurement Office. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you hear me. Yes, we can hear you, but we don't see. Yes, now we see you already. Yes, so perhaps a quick look at 3 sessions which we had today. The first session which we had within the group of Visegrad group countries. Well, we have similar paths and we face similar challenges. How to make BEAM more common, how to standardize, how to organize national BEAM implementation. I believe that undoubtedly we can be inspired by our regional experience. The second session, in turn, shows us that the first experience with BEAM project are already behind us. We have the whole range of experience related to implementation thereof, and the question remains on how to bring them to universal solutions. Ideas in the session were pointed at. Definitely they require further discussion, especially if you take into account how many sub areas are comprised in the third session coming to its end. Definitely it is a prospect of the fact that the academia, the world of education at this current stage can support a variety of participants and various entities of our BEAM market, and the prospect for development in this very area, because in education it is very broad. These are positive conclusions for the future, and I would like to use them to conclude our meeting, but also taking this opportunity that I am holding the mic. I wanted to thank Professor Marek Almak and Silesian University, as well as Mr. Dariusz Kasznik, President of European Center of BEAM Certification, for cooperation on the HYDE PARK and for the will to continue this formula of discussion, as well as for moderating our discussions. And I would like to thank very much the whole infra team providing for this conference. Without them, e-conference would not be possible. I would also like to express special thanks to representatives of Visegrad Group who participated today in this morning panel. Thanks to Jaroslav Neheba, Michal Pasiar, and Marek Zegoracz. We are grateful, and we hope that this cooperation, the further discussion in the V4 group about BEAM, will be continued also in the future. And thanks to other speakers, from those from public areas, but also academia and science, and all participants to HYDE PARK who shared their experience with us, and those, first of all, who all day accompanied us online in today's event. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Justyna Pożarowska. We hope for continuation of cooperation. Maybe we expand it onto the 3Cs situation. Well, honorable ladies and gentlemen, maybe what I'm going to say now will respond a few questions which emerged during the discussion. As the program is very tight, after discussing it with Marek, we decided to give up a presentation about organizer, one of the co-organizers of this. That means Foundation European BIM Certification Center, which I have the honor to be president of. But let me say a few words about the foundation, and first of all about people of the foundation, because without them we would not be possible to exist. Well, BIM experts representing various circles and entities using a variety of software specialists with international experience very often. Apart from top competence in BIM, they are open and willing to share their knowledge and experience. I would like to specify many names here of people who cooperate with us, who support us. Unfortunately, time is limited, so therefore I would like to pass on thanks to them through two people, Dr. Jacek Magiera, whom you saw in the former panel, who is head of the foundation, men of the foundation who never say no, always willing to help. And the second person who represent the way of acting of people of the foundation is Maciej Kindler, recalled already, who, having done a huge career in BIM in the UK, working on projects worth billions of pounds, never said no, always came to here to run classes, be it at HGH, University of Technology, or banking school, ready to share experience with those people. So I would like to thank everybody through these two people. And finally, what do we do as a foundation? We educate postgraduate studies. We cooperate with ODITK company implementing trainings for people who want to learn more about BIM according to the program, to the curriculum we have prepared. And we implement BIM. The best known project was the one recalled many a time also by Mr. Director General of GDDK, that means Zator project. But we implemented many projects, and we keep doing that. We introduce new standards, whereas these standards are of a variety of importance. BIM standards, so we participated in BIM standard PL project. Very often we implement LOD, LOI, and we also were the first to introduce an exam as a way of evaluating competences in public tender. We do pre-implementation audits in order to help ordering parties, designers or construction companies to avoid making mistakes when implementing BIM. And standards in BIM by ordering parties, so we prepared many templates for the ordering party aimed at facilitating their activities after entering this BIM PAM. And you know how important for BIM are people's competences, so we certify. You ask how to check to verify the competences. We having experience from Zator on how difficult and hard it is to organize an exam verifying the competences. We launched verification of BIM competences. We have prepared BIM coordinators training, and a person who will show you a certificate of the foundation proving that they are a certified BIM coordinator. That person really knows how to do it and how to coordinate BIM. That person knows BIM subjects and knows the tools. Now we keep working on further tools, but I will avoid talking of them because I always avoid talking about what we will do, how, but I talk about what we have already done, we boast about. It was brief, yes? Yes, thank you. So I'm closing BIM HYDE Park. Please be invited to a brief break and then a workshop session. First, infraBIM Academy. For there will be a surprise for all looking for asset management. Then Jakub Stanasiuk from Science Design will show you how to export BIM models from Civil 3D and Revit. And Arkadiusz Leśko and Michał Latała from Bentley Systems will present coordination from Arcan System will present coordination of infrastructural project in the time of OpenBIM in exchange with common data exchange. So see you after the break.